You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant. And yeah, we took a couple weeks off, just had some vacation time with the family and just moving into a new house as a whole. So it's been a fun time here, but still have had a lot of requests to get back at it. And so in this episode, we want to tackle, I want to say digital benchmarking, and that's across the board of where do people stand. I have a lot of conversations right now where people have an opportunity to pick their head up and try to do an assessment, and yet they have no idea how to compare themselves to other people. And so got connected with, through the network, a lot of different brands connected me over to Declan Kearney over at DCG. Just what he's doing in this space is phenomenal and just fits in perfectly with what's taking place and around brands and what they're looking for today as far as benchmarking goes, as long as a ton of other topics. We'll probably get into digital shelf. We'll probably get into disconnect with the C-suite. It's going to be a really fun conversation as a whole. But Declan, I want to kick it over to you. If you want to do, brief intro on yourself and the company, that would be awesome. And then we can kind of jump into the conversation. Sound good?
Excellent, Aaron. Thank you so much. Honored to be a guest of yours, and congrats on your recent move. It's a time of the year, isn't it, where people need time off. You've done a lot in the last couple of weeks. So Declan Kearney is my name. I'm founder of a company called DCG, which I established 2 years ago in Singapore. I won't go back. My career goes back too long to cover the couple of decades and a bit in business. I've been in the digital commerce space since 2014, when I joined a gentleman called Gary Moroney, who established Clavis many years ago. As your listeners in your community probably know, Clavis and Profitero were the original digital shelf providers. So I joined that business in 2014. If you permit me a bit of a background, because it might be interesting.
For sure. And then it's going to come up Singapore, and we can dive into Clavis a little bit. I used them when I was at Perigo. And it's interesting. Yeah, I would love to hear the background though. So Gary asked me to lead the strategic alliances business, so established partnerships. In reality, in 2014, Clavis was still growing and maturing as a business. So I think I said to Gary after 6 months, I think, you don't really need me in this role and in this capacity, because we weren't really ready for partnerships at that stage. And Gary and others agreed. I supported the leadership team in various other areas. I come from a commercial and entrepreneurial sales background, so I contributed to the business. But in early 2015, one of our lead customers, Unilever, had a request in that somebody in the business who was pretty clued in travel out to Shanghai to support the business out in China. So I found myself in Asia, in China for the first time, but also in Asia for the first time in 2015. I ended up commuting between Dublin and through Heathrow to Shanghai, 24-hour door-to-door trip for 3 years, would you believe? I have 3 children at home. This is my threes story. But I essentially found myself picking up a very small team in Shanghai. We had 5 individuals in the business. We had to make a couple of changes to the team at the time. And I had to, I suppose, stabilize is the wrong word, but really cement our position in China. Really enjoyed it. Found I was running an e-commerce business in China, of all markets in the world, to be out in China. The land of Alibaba and Tencent, and obviously now Douyin, which does $250 billion a year in GMV as a social channel. It wasn't doing it back in 2015. So I spent a number of years leading the business and building it out. We ended up with about 55 people in Shanghai. We ended up acquiring Emian, spelled Y-I-A, but Emian, I think is the pronunciation. They were based in Shenzhen, really strong in the Chinese market and semantic analysis in particular, but also tracking market share on Tmall and Taobao and Pinduoduo, various channels. So that was a great acquisition for the Ascential Group. So I'm jumping ahead. Clavis was obviously acquired by Ascential Group towards the end of 2017. I was asked to move out to Shanghai. I said, prefer to be in Singapore. And actually, most of the regional HQs in Asia are located in Singapore. So it was agreed that I would be funded with my family to head out to Singapore. And I spent 3 years in Singapore. I spent almost 4 years. My family came back to Ireland about 18 months ago, and I returned to Ireland about a year ago. I'll come on to DCG in a moment. So that's my digital commerce background between 2014 and today. Was very much leading the business in Asia. I was very fortunate to have a great team out in Asia. We didn't have a product that necessarily fitted the Chinese market, but I employed experts in the market who helped turn the data that we were able to gather into insights and deliver value for our customers. And then, traveled all around Asia, in most places in Asia, from India through Australia. Didn't make it to New Zealand, unfortunately. As a rugby fan, that's disappointing. Wrapped up that business then in after we had a 3-year earn-out, and I had a really good time at Ascential Group, but I was probably itching to do something new. And that's what I did. 2 years ago, I set up DCG, which I guess we'll come on to.
Yeah. So then if we jump into what you're seeing a little bit, I mean, do you want to explain a little bit around DCG?
Sure.
I understand just because so many brands have connected me over to you and kind of given their take on what you're doing, but would love to hear a little bit about what you're doing now. And then we can jump into maybe some of the findings that you're seeing across the board, winners and losers in the space, or pitfalls or strengths or weaknesses. We can get into all of that as well, but we'd love to hear kind of like the business model that you have now to kind of set a framework.
Yeah, perfect. And as I've committed to you, not a sales pitch. I'll keep it. I'll keep it simple. So what I learned, and what the team that I've built have learned, is that there's a level of paranoia across the industry. Most consumer brand leaders in digital commerce imagine and believe that everyone else is ahead of them. Okay, you've got
100%.
You've got global leaders with multiple markets at different stages of maturity. Everyone looking over their shoulders. Even the perceived leaders in the space, they're not perfect. Others and some of their peers and competitors think that they're accelerating faster. They've got more resources. They've got better resources, better analytics. So what I found and what I determined was that validation was needed in the industry for leaders of digital commerce in global consumer brand organizations to be able to validate that they're making the right decisions in digital commerce capabilities. So specifically what we've built at DCG is a digital commerce capability benchmarking business. We've essentially named it SEEK, Strategy, Enablers, Execution, and Culture. There are 43 sub-levels, which I will not go into, but essentially the four pillars are strategy, enablers, execution, and culture. Strategy is really about where to play. Enablers is around how to play. Execution is, enablers is what's needed to play. Execution is how to actually get the job done. And then culture is, I suppose, doing it the right way or doing it in the most agile way possible. So we built that framework, launched it in Singapore 2 years ago, but very much then working with a small number of customers, we launched it globally towards the end of Q4 last year. We set up a community, Aaron, of digital commerce leaders, and really we asked the community what their key challenges are. And while we came up with a list of 17 business challenges that were shared across the community, we realized that in benchmarking, it takes anywhere from 10 to 12 weeks to actually run a benchmark, consolidate the data, analyze it, and play it back to our benchmarking participants. So we realized we can't answer 17 questions in 2023. So we answered four key questions. We ran a global digital shelf optimization benchmark, complete end-to-end processes of how to optimize digital shelf. Amazon Europe, then a global digital retail media, and the final one, which is recurring all the time, is the SEEK benchmark. So we built that, and the final piece of the puzzle, I suppose, is and we're quite proud of this, when we identify gaps in capabilities, or let's call it opportunities for improvements, and when we play that back to local markets amongst the brand manufacturers, the first question is always, can we fill that gap internally, or do we need external partners? And a lot of the time with these global organizations, they need external partners. So what we built then was a portal with about 220 tech and service providers across anything from Amazon optimization through to Southeast Asia enablers and everything in between: digital shelf search, media, content, etc., executive training, all sorts of categories that are needed to help in digital commerce. And we open up that portal to the brand leaders, really to help them see. Can I say this? See through the BS and the the rhetoric in the industry and say, okay, that provider has that capability in that market, and we know they work with these 5 brands. And we've done that independently. So we've no commercial or strategic relationship with any of the tech or service providers. And I love doing that. I come from a kind of a business relationship background, and we enjoy that piece because we've become trusted as an independent, route to identifying who should we be working with.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's one of the parts that I absolutely love. That's where I spend most of my day, right? Is just talking with brands and helping them from the standpoint of, from Amazon, there's 1,000 different agencies, but there's 5 that really work. Right? Performance marketing, streaming TV ads, right? Chargeback recovery, distributed logistics, micro fulfillment, whatever it might be. There's only a few that actually work. And, we work together as a community, right? The BWG Connect piece is brands are participating and helping vet out people as a whole and then sharing, right, across the board. So completely love what you're doing. It's awesome.
Yeah. Right.
If I were to jump in, then what are you finding in these? Yeah. So you're working with a variety of brands, you're doing these benchmarking, you're doing all this research with them. What are you finding?
Yeah.
I think that's what people are most interested in.
Absolutely. If I go around the wheel, if I go around Seek, so from a strategy perspective, when we look at, if the North Star objectives have been clearly set, and if the channel strategy is clear, channel segmentation has been conducted and is almost a dynamic process. I say dynamic process because with the emergence of quick commerce, massively in a market like China, but in most markets through COVID, right? The question of where to direct dollars and investment is no more. It's just a burning question, and it's almost it's not a daily question, but certainly every quarter that process needs to be in place. What we're seeing from a strategic perspective is that most leadership teams, but not all, have a pretty clear definition of where they want to go with their digital commerce business. Okay, they've got dollar values or growth or profitability goals. Okay, I say not all because it's surprising how many have digital commerce / e-commerce in their pillars of excellence, but haven't much substance behind it. And it becomes almost a rhetoric for the business that, of course, e-commerce is strategic, but when you look behind it, and this is really detrimental to the business, if that's not backed up with facts and figures and tangible KPIs, then the challenge you see, and we've discussed about this offline ourselves, Aaron, is at the operational level. So where the work gets done, okay. So, but just one level below the leadership level, there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect in understanding, well, actually, are we pursuing the right channels? Are we investing our dollars in the right areas, in the right capabilities? So first, from a strategic perspective, we do see a disconnect and sometimes a lack of clarity in where to play when it comes to digital commerce channels. And think about it, you've got marketplace, you've got B2B, you've got pure play, social, D2C, and quick commerce. I sometimes give them in a different order, but you've got 6 or 7 channels. And it feels like almost, look at the changes happening in quick commerce, different business going out of business every 6 to 8 weeks, probably in the past 12 months. So these are dynamic changes that are impacting consumer behavior. So that's the one I call out from a strategic perspective.
Yeah, no, I see it all the time. It's just interesting how you put it, because I think at the high level, they do have a view of, hey, this is my it's easy to run, right? This is the volume through a channel, and here's the overall profitability. But that doesn't necessarily it's not directly replicated at a lower operational level, right? Where something like an Amazon takes 5 people to run, and something like a Wayfair takes 1. right?
Yeah.
And then what's the expertise and what are the tools that we need to actually effectively manage a marketplace like Amazon? They're different than a Wayfair or a Home Depot or a Walmart or a direct consumer or a B2B site, let alone how do you spend marketing dollars as a whole?
Yeah.
No, it's
Exactly.
just, so that disconnect, do you see the disconnect also in, I see a disconnect in communication, like the vernacular you can use with upper management is limited, right? From the standpoint of they don't live the day-to-day life. And so sometimes what they're looking for, the KPIs they're looking to have communicated are not always the right KPIs, but they're the easiest KPIs to communicate.
Yeah. But you know what? You're giving me a license, and this is for your audience. This is unrehearsed, I assure you, but you're giving me a license to bring up something that I love referring to. There are a number of brands that are seen as leaders, and they're leaders for a reason. The disconnect, I'm going to give the example of the ultimate connection, which is partly, it's a knowledge and a belief, but it's a cultural thing. Before Jean-Paul Agent retired from L'Oréal, he spoke at one of his last investor conferences about winning the algorithm. And I'll never forget, and I wrote it down since, and he essentially speaks like a digital commerce director would speak about winning the algorithm. And there's a lot more to it, obviously, than that. But for a global CEO and chairman to have the knowledge and the language and the articulation of what it takes to win online, digital, and L'Oréal, it's not a beauty company, it's a beauty tech company. That's how they describe themselves, right? That connection, and I was making sure that those dots have certainly been retained within L'Oréal, because Nicolas, I can't pronounce his surname very well, but Hieronymus, I think, is how you say his surname. He has since spoken about, AI and data and e-commerce being within the DNA of L'Oréal. I think that's what's missing in most organizations. Too many organizations might have a VP of digital commerce or e-commerce who's not quite at the executive table. And too many organizations also see what used to be 2 or 3%, which is now for many 8, 9, 10%, but for some, L'Oréal's online business is 28% of their total. P&G is 14% out of context. So that's how far L'Oréal have gone ahead. And I think it's that understanding that it's not only the dollar value, but you and I discussed this before, and I don't mean to jump to a separate point, but it's the influence that the overall digital commerce experience and capabilities and touch points are having on all of retail. Okay, depending on the category, it's much lower in food and bev than it is in electronics. Cosmetics and beauty is somewhere in the middle, probably 45, 50% on average. I think leaders understand that digital commerce and how they invest in digital commerce is not just impacting that sometimes difficult to quantify 8, 9, 10, 14%. It's actually having a much bigger influence.
So, what are the changes? I think I understand what you're saying. It's different having just a VP of digital. The person you put in that seat might actually have to be at the executive table at this point in time. Are brands undervaluing still, from what you're seeing from the research, undervaluing the digital line? That's kind of what I'm hearing when you're saying, hey, we're still looking at it as 8%, but actually the impact is 25, 30, 40%.
Definitely. We started presenting these figures to a number of our community members recently. And the global VPs of digital commerce, who is our typical advocate in the organization, they acknowledge it. And of course, they believe it. But I've seen very few who've actually presented it in that way to the executive leadership team. And surprisingly, when we look at all the capabilities in our framework, touches like 1,200 data points. It's very deep. But education of the leadership team comes up regularly, which is kind of astounding in 2023, but it does come up regularly.
Yeah. I mean, I just have enough conversations at this point in time that, it just happens. I'm not surprised when you say it comes up regularly. I would say, if you think about, especially pre-pandemic, I would say there was probably, 1,500 people that really we'll just isolate the US, right? 1,500 people that really understood digital. We're like true digital executives. And we hit the pandemic and all of a sudden we need 8,000. Well, people don't immediately come up to speed on that. And the people who are thrown into those positions aren't at the executive level, right? They're sitting out there trying to handle and figure out major problems. How does the company survive? What's happening with the supply chain? Our closed store is going to be closed for a long time. What do we do with excess inventory? They're making really complicated decisions. And at the same time, the digital side is accelerating 5x what anybody thought it was. And they are not immersed in it. I mean, this is a benefit if you're a smaller company at this point in time, right? Because you are in the day-to-day and you're handling more. But for larger companies, that executive team is not in the day-to-day of that accelerated learning program. And so now you've got professionals, when you're in a spot where you understand what's happening in 25% of the business intimately more than the C-suite, the executive team, sometimes that disconnect, it's almost like an antagonistic disconnect because they don't like to feel that they don't know what's going on, but inherently they don't know what's going on. And it takes somebody very unique, like you're talking about at L'Oreal, to say, I may not understand it all, but I'm going to rely on my team to teach it to me. And I'm going to go all in and over index on relying on my team to provide me what they're saying I need to know, rather than me creating my own, simplified version so I can report to everybody else.
Exactly. And Aaron, just to back that up, and I wanted to quote, I had a couple of notes in preparation for our conversation. I want to make sure I get the quote right. Nicolas Nemus, who's taken over as CEO, took over middle of last year at L'Oreal. He speaks about a multipolar strategy. So I'm reading from a recent release. So as you say, e-commerce is growing. It grew 8.9% last year. I think that was it for the year 2022. But L'Oreal sees a multipolar distribution strategy emerging, with stores that are owned and operated by the company working in tandem with e-commerce that moves beyond the traditional channels to D2C and B2C platforms. So they're differentiating less across channels, online and offline. I prefer the term in-store because last time I checked, in-store is the real world. I don't like the term offline, but hey, there you go. But the other one I really wanted to quote, because I love what they do, is in the lady's name, she's one of the European leaders at Lego, Amy Pearson, talks about our online platform and in-store offering work hand in hand. It's not about one versus the other. Simple quote, simple reference. These brand manufacturers are not debating the value and are not challenging the value and are not struggling to, of course, they're struggling with diverting retail media budgets, and they've got the same questions as others. But I do believe there's an inherent belief and understanding that where they invest in digital, the beneficiary is not just the online sales. It's benefiting their business. And if you look at both business models, of course it is. People making decisions in store are being heavily influenced by what they're seeing online. Not all through your traditional online or e-commerce channels. This is, those stats I quoted earlier on would look at multiple digital touch points. So you look at social media touch points, but the online shopping, simplifying it piece is the biggest influence.
Then what are strengths or weaknesses that you're seeing come out? So, I mean, we've talked about that piece. Are there other ones? Because I think we could actually talk about executive education, we call it that, for 3 or 4 hours. Like, hey, what are the best practices? What are people doing right? How are they doing it? That's like a whole nother episode, I think. Are there other things on the strengths or weaknesses? So number one, I agree with you. Tackle the executive education piece. Have a candid conversation with them about where it's at, why it's more complicated. It's probably more than a weekly meeting. It's probably at the get-go, a daily meeting around what's going on to get them to the point where they feel comfortable. So, that's another whole best practice episode. But are there other strengths or
for sure,
or things that pop up on both sides?
I would just, my 30 seconds more on the strategy piece before I move on to the other would be that, the communication and the articulation of channel strategy at a cross-functional level down through the organization. If that can be achieved, then everyone's on the same page. In terms of the next, and I'm following our own wheel. In terms of enablers, we talk about what data, tools, insights, org structure. How should we be structured, and what should we be acquiring, buying in, acquiring ourselves? We're starting to see, we have a lot of conversations around tech stack, right? And the digital commerce tech stack hasn't been very clearly defined. Much easier. Digital marketing is a longer established trade than digital commerce. The tech stack, which starts with but doesn't end with digital shelf and PIMS and DAM, it's pretty disjointed in a lot of organizations. There's been an effort to bring in, right?
It's really big. I mean, you hit you hit this time where in the pandemic, and as you get out of it, where there's a ton of cash, right? PE, VC money is flying everywhere, and everybody's got the next greatest idea, and all this money flows in. And now, yes, the digital teams are being pitched every other day on something.
I think you've met him. If not, I know we'll do a call soon. But my esteemed colleague and partner in crime, Gregor Murray, loves to talk about working with partners to figure out those who will sell you what you need and deliver what you need versus selling you what they have.
Yeah.
Right? And selling features and functionality and all the wonderful stuff. Now, you and I know the same people among the leadership teams. There's some wonderful solutions and they're critical. And your P&Gs and L'Oreals and Unilevers and Legos and Dysons of this world, they still depend on lots of external partners that have built amazing expertise. And we could name, as you and I know, we could name the top 10, no problem.
Yeah. And it's also funny, the next episode of this is actually a rationalization of the tech stack episode.
Okay, good. Another reason why we need to keep talking.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely. So when we look at that tech stack, I have no doubt that many global brands are wasting millions of dollars on data that they're not using. And I know it's a cliche when it comes to data and big data. There's a lot of data around the digital shelf, okay? And when brands really, it's quite a mature space. Obviously, we've got a very short list of technology providers who can do this globally. Lots of local niche partners that I often advocate in markets like India, China, Japan, Korea in particular, where there are such nuances that I think you need local expertise. But too many organizations have bought into multiple metrics at frequencies that they cannot manage to act upon. It just seemed like the right idea. Now, the industry has been commoditized, sadly, because I think there's great value in digital shelf, but for various reasons, that's a beer conversation around it, because I witnessed the commoditized of the digital shelf industry firsthand. But due to a lack of confidence in accuracy of data and a lack of skilled resources to act on data, organizations waste a lot of money on digital shelf, in particular, metrics that they're just not merited.
Do you actually step in then, like with the companies you're working with? Do you do that rationalization exercise?
We advise on it.
I totally agree with you that everybody's right now looking to, trim out things in the budget, but they don't want to carve out something they need. And I totally agree. They have so many things. They don't know how they're all connected on the back end. And if you remove one, does it collapse the house of cards, or can you get rid of a whole layer of them? People are, it's just a reality where people are at right now is, how can they do more?
And look, you and I both promote entrepreneurial behavior in this industry and new solutions, and let's name them. The likes of PackView and Profitero and MicMac and Data Impact and Nielsen IQ, eFundamentals. There are lots of, and I've named a lot of the bigger ones there. There's lots of innovation and huge value in it. So your audience don't get me wrong around that. You don't need these partners. It's more of so yes, we do is the answer to your question. And it's more, the simple advice is when you look at the metrics, and I'm focusing in on digital shelf because that's the foundation for so much. A lot of the language perfect digital store or perfect store online has been around a long time. Unilever coined the perfect the PSO, perfect store online. P&G have their cars, platform, and others have different variations of that. But everyone talks about the perfect digital store. And with the ambition of a perfect digital store comes needing lots of data and lots of metrics. The disconnect comes between the reality that there is no perfect digital store. There's a sufficient digital store, and we like to advocate sufficiency over perfection. We are working with a global organization not so long ago who told us they've been working on the basics for about 11 years, right? So there's as long as you can work on the basics, but actually it's more about being focused, and the metrics you need for power SKUs in certain priority channels and the data you need to back up your strategy is very different than what you need for the long tail of SKUs that you have in a less priority channel. So I think the industry is still getting to grips with understanding what data is needed at what frequency, aligned with the capability internally of actually making sense of it all and actually taking the actions. The other area that I think there's a big gap, and has been for years, and this is where some wasted money comes in. I don't talk about wasted money too much because we do encourage partnerships, but is the fact that the industry has been tracking PC for metrics as a priority, partly because technology providers have struggled, and very few can do it effectively, to track mobile apps. Yet it's on mobile apps where most of the consumer traffic is. And again, influencing not just online, but influencing in-store sales. I do believe a number of providers in the industry speak about, we track mobile, but they may well be talking about mobile web, which is the same as PC, same data source. So I feel like there's an opportunity for brands to look at markets and understand where the traffic is. And there's a long way to go for a lot of brands to be tracking the right data at the right frequency and getting that into the hands of the people who can bring the data intelligently to their customer, to the retailer. So it's a whole loop that's it's been quite imperfect for some time.
Yeah. What about this? The research that comes out for a long time around the digital divide. There's a variety of different publications that have come out by the major research institutions that are really cool. Like, what are your thoughts on digital divide?
I'd love if Deloitte continued what they started in about 2013. So when I started in this industry, one of the first reports that I read, probably in 2014, was Navigating the Digital Divide. And it was a good study. I think it was probably quite US centric, but that's fine. It was a good start. It was a good study. It estimated that anywhere between 30 and I think 62% of in-store sales were being influenced by digital touchpoints. 30 in food and bev, 60 plus in consumer electronics, and then other categories in between. I've been asking this question to brand leaders recently. Do they believe in that type of proportion of influence on their business? The other, by the way, Forrester had a good report last year on this topic, and Publitas, which I believe is part of the Publicis group, have had similar reports. The challenge is the attribution. Okay, very difficult most organizations find it hard to actually quantify their exact online sales depending on channels, B2B complications, etc.
Again, a tech stack issue, right? Which is
it's a tech stack, and it's kind
of how I got here, right? It's like, okay,
exactly. And
how are people measuring this today?
Well, that's it. If someone can crack the attribution of the influence that digital has on all of retail,
$1 billion company.
That's a $1 billion company. Yeah. We're not attempting to do that at DCG. But I really like the sentiment of the reports. And like I say, I believe the leaders that I've referenced earlier on inherently believe in the influence, and they don't need the attribution. They don't need the figures. And I think that let's call them trailblazers who kind of get it and realize it's happening. But the laggards are going to wait until they get evidence in their category, on their channels, that this investment is impacting what you and I do in store. Today, I spoke to some consumer electronics leaders who believe that over 90% of their business, of their in-store, is being influenced by digital. And that makes absolute sense. Would you buy a TV without online research of some sorts? And a lot of that's going to start on Amazon, right? So recently, we've been looking at the figures, and if we take, say, for example, L'Oreal, just to go back to them, 28% of the business online, but what they're doing, what they've done with their acceleration online, is probably having an influence of about 65% of their business. If we look at their category and the influence, and I'd say that's probably a low end estimate, which means I'd have to check the figures, L'Oreal, in terms of their revenue. Are they 45 billion or so? But for me, over 50% of their business is being influenced positively by what they've done in digital commerce.
No. And they're leaders. What are like the number one things that people? So we've hit on executive leadership. We've looked at rationalization of tech stack. We talk about managing digital divide. Like, what are like top things people need to work on from what you're pulling out outside of those things? And just people are taking notes. That's what I'm trying to think of.
I go back to China in 2016. I spent a couple of years in China, 2015, 16, and some of 2017. Before that event happened, I think they call it a pandemic. And I witnessed what L'Oréal were doing in China and what P&G were doing out of Guangzhou in China, where at the time P&G had 50 or 60 data scientists dedicated to, they probably called it e-commerce in China at the time. And the leaders, and I would zone in on this, are acquiring the right data from the right partners, getting it into a skilled team of people who know what to do with it and how to take it to their customers, the retailers. They've got an understanding of the algorithms. They've got an understanding today. It's obviously moving towards generative AI. Algorithms are still relevant. But they just, not only is it in their DNA, and I apply this now today to leaders outside of China, those who are following these processes that I witnessed first in China. No questions asked. This is all about the data. This goes back to 2015. It's not a surprise that they were leading. L'Oréal in particular in China was just a machine, an absolute machine. And it meant that Alibaba, so Tmall, Taobao, etc., would be most excited about meeting L'Oréal because L'Oréal had the intelligence, they had the conversation, they had the understanding of the business, where other brands in that category, and I know this for a fact because we worked with multiple brands. Now, they didn't have the budget that L'Oréal may have had and that P&G had, but it's kind of a different world. That's, to me, what separates those leaders from the rest is their ability to acquire the right data across the right channels and work with it and create use cases. I remember GSK in Europe, obviously now Haleon, consumer healthcare side. They were brilliant as well. There was a guy I got to know well, Alan Young and GSK. Many of your audience may be familiar with Alan. He and the global team at GSK did great stuff. And they generated use cases. They presented use cases internally across the organization to prove the value of what they were doing in e-commerce. And for me, it's almost a cycle when we see the leaders, because leaders change, people change. I think when you're as big as a L'Oréal and as a P&G and as a Lego, it's easier to retain the skill set. But the problem for those slightly below, which are still major global brands, but they may have a very small team, there's quite a bit of churn in the industry. Sorry to digress, but when you do a good job in e-commerce or digital commerce in a brand, you get well known, and the big boys come looking for you, right?
Yeah.
So building that sustainable skill set and creating the use cases, improving the value of what's being done in digital commerce is, not many have.
You make an interesting point too on the staffing side, which is, there's the part where, the digital team has been undervalued for a long time. And when you undervalue them, just like you're saying, they will leave and they will make more money. If you are good in the digital space, they're highly coveted people at this point in time. And I think organizationally, at the executive level need to start really, really valuing. They say they value it, but I get more the feeling they value the Amazon account, the direct to consumer business. They value the digital sales, but not necessarily the team that's driving that. And it's a lack of knowledge, right? And in lack of knowledge, you oversimplify and assume the worst. So when you don't understand everything that goes into, all I do is talk to brands all day, every day, right? And I run into it a lot, especially right now, is they have no idea what I do and they just let me go. And then the brands are scrambling, and then I'll get a call from somebody else on the team. Hey, can you help us figure things out? I'm like, well, yeah, you need to hire somebody, but you just let them go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, I've been picking your brain for a while. What's top of mind for you? Like, I always like to throw it back. Like, all I do is talk to brands all over the spectrum. Like, are there things that?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose I'm sitting here in Europe. We do work globally, but the fact is we've a lighter presence in the States. But I know you're globally, but you're sitting in the US. I suppose. Well, recently we had a workshop with a customer last week, playing back the Amazon Europe strategy results. I suppose my first question for you is do you believe Amazon is going to acquire Ocado, and how is Amazon, being global but US driven, going to continue influencing the digital commerce space?
I mean, the short answer is I don't know, because I stopped trying to predict what Amazon was going to do a long time ago, other than they're going to keep coming for the brand's margin dollars. That's what they're going to do. And Jeff said that from the beginning, right? It always surprises me when brands are like, I can't believe Amazon's our lowest margin channel. Like, Jeff came out and said, your margin is my opportunity. He didn't hide it. He literally said, this is what I'm going to do, and this is where I'm coming. I'm not going to charge customers more to make more money. Mm-hmm. I'm going to pay you less. But what's going on right now with Amazon, I mean, they have an extreme push to profitability, and everybody's seen it at this point in time. Mm-hmm. I think Walmart has stubbed their toe so many times. They had so many opportunities to swoop in. If they would just take a partnership approach with brands and make their platform easy to use, their paid media platform, really, fine tune it so it actually works well and provides a lot of great data, they could crush it. Brands are looking for a partner. And at the same time, Amazon is like, hey, we're scaling back people even more. And anybody that was on the first party and the vendor side last, Q4, they saw it when Amazon just randomly is like, hey, you know what? We're going to take it down to 3 weeks inventory. So for 2.5 months, people didn't get POs, wrecked their year. And Amazon doesn't care. And if you go out of stock, it's the next item up. They just don't care. So that's the struggle I think Amazon sees as it tries to grow, is that people want partnerships. They want that connection, right? And they value that connection. And it goes beyond just making money all the time. And so
are there, and forgive me, you can say I'm not here to promote or advocate Amazon. We know that they're incredibly dominant, but the more I hear from brands is that a lot of our customers don't have and don't believe it's possible to have a relationship or partnership with Amazon. Is that a culture that will ever change?
No. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's not. My first vendor manager was hilarious. His name was Juan, and he was just saying, like, if Amazon could snap its finger and turn us, this is, at Amazon, my vendor manager, if Amazon could snap its finger and turn us all into robots, it would in an instant, right? Jeff would in an instant, turn them all into robots, because they don't want that connection. And that's part of the reason that they cycle through people so fast into different positions, is that you never get to that relationship stage where, taking somebody out to dinner really matters, right? And it's not going to happen. I mean, they don't mind you taking them out for dinner. I mean, I did it plenty of times when I was at Paragon, lots of times. But it wasn't anything meaningful because they were gone in 9 months. And so when you constantly have to pay more and more and more to, be engaged in a relationship, at some point in time, you just throw up your hands. You're like, okay, there's nothing really here. Which, everybody says Amazon's pay to play. It is 100%.
Yeah, so. That's it. As you spoke, for me, because we've looked at the technology stack and the partner ecosystem, let's say the technology and service ecosystem, I'm always interested in learning more about who else, and I don't know the answer. That's why I'm asking your opinion. Who else is acquisitive and may become acquisitive in this space? Because if half of what we say is true in terms of the digital influence and the importance, and as that continues to grow, the technology and service providers in this space are incredibly valuable at what they're doing. And as they evolve, some will find, the ultimate secret sauce to whether it's generative AI, predictive stuff. Ascential have been very acquisitive, we know, and most of their acquisitions have worked out pretty well. Publicis have been acquisitive. eCommerce IQ with eFundamentals, that was a good move, and then Nielsen IQ acquiring Data Impact. But in the grand scheme of things, there are very few big players acquiring any of these 220 tech and service providers that you and I both track. Do you think there's a reason for that, or are there other players that I haven't named who are maybe making moves?
Well, right now it's interesting just because the PE VC money is kind of dried up a little bit. The debt's you can't take on as much debt as you used to, and so there's a lot of companies that they know if they can just wait this out, they're going to get a lot more money. The tough part, and I see this all the time, is when you have a startup that's 2, 3, 4 years old, they're really cooking and they're being innovative and people are jumping on board and they have customer service and people love working with them. And then the acquisition happens and then the earnout happens. And then when that founder passion leaves, there's a drop in what all the expectations were, right? Yeah. Where now you call up, you're like, hey, this broke, can you fix it? And they're like, well, that's an extra, an hour. So I'm going to send you a work order and charge you for an hour. And you're like, whoa. We've been working together for 5 years or 3 years or whatever it is. Yeah. You never charged me before. Well, yeah, I know, but now we have to hit profitability targets and now we have earnout targets and now all these different things that come in. So I always hold my breath when a partner gets, that's all. People are sending in new partners all the time. Hey, check these guys out. They're awesome. I always get nervous when they get acquired. I always get nervous.
No, you're right too. Yeah, it's a really good point.
So I think from the standpoint of slowing down a little bit is just, if my company a year ago was worth, I could get it for $10 million or 20 million, I could sell it for. And right now it's 8, but I'm putting cash in my pocket every week. I'm sticking this out, right? I'm not hurting. They're usually these founders are making pretty good money. If you survive to this point, you got to go out and get more funding right now. You really, really, really have to stand out. I think that'll change again another year here. You can still get cash. It's just a lot harder than it was. And so if you're making money, wait it out. Why? Yeah, that's what I see happening for a lot.
That's a good point. Yeah. Very good point. Excellent. I had a few reference points that I could share with your audience, and just looking from the digital retail media. I'll maybe share a couple of snippets before we wrap up.
That sounds perfect. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, just a few snippets. We put some of this stuff out on LinkedIn, but the most recent benchmark that we just closed recently is digital retail media. So we ran this globally. We had about 49 global brands participate. Probably the biggest topic is budget, where digital retail media budget comes from. So 15% of budget is coming from new budget, didn't exist before. 20% is coming from customer or shopper marketing, 18% from trade budgets, and the rest is coming from traditional above the line budgets. So search, social, print, and TV. Which is interesting. So there's no one obvious kind of source. It's a myriad.
50% is new. Did you say 50% is new?
Sorry, 15. 15.
Oh, 15. Okay.
15. Right. So still a lot, and that's always when we our participants come in and we validated the questions that we want to ask the community. That was one of the burning questions: was where does the budget come from?
Is this something you can share too? Is this something that you published?
Yeah, well, we share. So our report, it runs to about 65, 70 pages because we answer about 60 questions per benchmark. But headlines for sure, we can share. We share headlines. They're teasers, Aaron.
Okay.
For you, of course, I can share a little bit more. Yeah. What else would be of interest? 83% from our digital shelf benchmark, which looked at the complete end-to-end processes, from understanding of metrics, confidence and accuracy of metrics, who people are working with, and who's actually generating competitive advantage. 83% of participants, and there were hundreds, I think, 350, 400 participants, believe that their cross-functional business does not understand the digital shelf metrics that are relevant to them, right? And everyone loves to talk about the cross-functional discipline that is digital commerce. Yet when it comes to it, if you get, and we see this, if we get good collaboration between commercial and marketing, that's good. If you can get supply chain on board, that's amazing, because that's so difficult and it causes complexity for supply chain. The ultimate organizations have this cross-functional understanding and belief across HR, finance, legal, job specs and the skills needed, etc. So that's kind of interesting. Lots more. Maybe I'll pick out one or two of those. Let me see. For example, 60% from the Amazon Europe benchmark believe that their organizations do not have sufficient capabilities to succeed on Amazon in terms of meeting their objectives on Amazon. And 54% of brands do not believe that supply chain is adaptable or flexible for Amazon. And again, that's in Europe. And that's probably a globally applicable theme. So anyway, we're not all about stats, but we convert a lot of that into playbooks and really interpreting.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking we should do a full-blown webinar on this. We can do a custom report with brands here, and then do a full-blown webinar. We can do a recap on another episode, but also do a full-blown webinar and just throw it all up there and let people walk through. Maybe we can do a US focused one specifically. I think that would be fantastic. I think. Yeah,
let's talk about that. I'd be inviting Gregor to join that again. The key objective of this is not just to throw stats out, but is to understand and bring an understanding of where brands sit, where the gaps are and what they should be doing. And it's not about the 20 things they should be doing. It's about understanding the gaps. And then as an organization, this is my advice to anyone listening anyway, as an organization deciding at a cross-functional level, we've all these gaps. We can't do them all. So what are the 3, 4, maximum 5 things we need to do in the next 6 months, preparing for 2024? Who owns them? Which function, which individual owns them? Can we do it internally? Can we do it externally? If we need external support, who do we work with? And who are the best in class people? And they can come to you and they can come to me and others for independent advice on who they should work with. That's what benchmarking is. That's what we've learned benchmarking is about. It's that old cliche, which I believe in. It's about actionable data and actionable insights. It's not just, nice to have stats. But delighted to have a further on conversation, Aaron. We've lots of ways we can collaborate.
Yeah. And this has been an absolute pleasure, my friend.
Likewise.
And I think, man, we cruised right through. This has been, this went long. This is awesome. So again, everybody encourage you, check out DCG. Is it DCG.com? Or DCG.ai?
Actually, .ai.
DCG.ai. Check out Declan Kearney and his team. They're doing some amazing things out there. They're great friends, partners, supporters of the network, and a ton of brands in it. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks, Declan.
Thank you so much.